Okay, Whitney, why do you do what you do?
I love that question. It all started during the pandemic. My partner and I were running a restaurant during the pandemic, which was crazy and scary. And we got to the point where we really didn't know day to day whether or not we were going to be able to keep things going. And we were kind of, for the first time in my life, putting together these worst case scenarios, starting to really look at what our life would look like if we just lost everything. And it was scary, but it was also kind of beautiful and comforting because, we knew that we would have support. We knew that if we lost our housing, we would be able to move into my parents' cozy basement. That we had, people and systems that we could fall back on. And at the same time that was happening to us, we saw all these other humans in our community and throughout the world facing the reality of that worst case scenario. And we saw this huge surge of people experiencing homelessness in the neighborhood where our restaurant was, the neighborhood where we lived. People were seeing those, block-long tent encampments popping up all over the city. And we kind of realized, what privilege we have. What an amazing situation that we're in, that even our worst case scenario, we're still having our basic needs met. And, on top of that, we had this restaurant, this big, beautiful kitchen, all of these amazing people working for us. And we were so motivated to just keep them working, keep things going, and keep us all feeling purposeful. Because, every one of us was kind of in this place of considering, what could happen if we lose everything. And so, we saw that we had this unique, privileged position where we could still help people, even though we were really feeling scared and a little bit hopeless ourselves. And so it was an idea that we had, way back in the beginning of the business, hey, we're going to start a restaurant and we're really going to help the community in the process. But once you get going and you're kind of I got to pay rent, I got to pay all these people, it's so much harder to really take the time to give back. And so it ended up being this gift that we couldn't focus on normal day-to-day services. We didn't even have the ability to serve people inside the restaurant for months and months because, Denver was back and forth with full shutdown, partial opening, and it was kind of all over the place. And so we decided, we're going to get the community to support us in this effort to feed folks experiencing homelessness in and around our neighborhood. And that's what we did. We called it the Giving Meals Program. And folks could come into the restaurant and buy a giving meal. So that would give them a meal as well as pay for someone else's meal. Or people could just sort of purchase a meal outright for someone in need. We were totally amazed by the response that we got, and friends that we have from all over the country were calling us and saying, hey, we'd love to donate. And it was such a beautiful community response that we saw. And it really kept us going during that super difficult time. And once we kind of got to the other side of the pandemic and things were functioning more normally, but, I would say the restaurant industry still isn't, quote unquote, back to normal. It's still really struggling, and a lot of businesses in general are struggling within that industry. But things were for the most part back to normal, and we were sort of faced with the decision of, do we keep going with this or do we do something else? You know, we weren't stuck anymore. We were making, you know, more stable income. But we just weren't sure if we wanted to, you know, keep running a restaurant. And so we arrived at the decision to sell the business. And right at that same time, because we had already started the process of forming a 501c3 so that we could do more meaningful fundraising for the Giving Meals program. We decided, you know, this is really what we love to do, and we didn't quite have our hearts in the restaurant anymore, and especially because it was really, really hard for us to be the kind of parents that we wanted to be to our daughter and run a restaurant at the same time. That was never actually part of the plan. Because when we started the restaurant, I was also coming off the heels of a sort of traumatic miscarriage of twins. And I didn't think that we were ever going to be able to have a kid. So when she came along, we were like, oh, how do we do both? And so for all those reasons, we decided, you know, our heart is in this Giving Meals program. We're going to, you know, dedicate ourselves to this full time. We're going to be able to be more present parents for our daughter. And we, you know, walked away from the restaurant and started doing this full time.
How do you think people find something meaningful like you have found? Because when I hear your story, I hear a problem arises or a obstacle comes into your life. And then immediately the solution is something meaningful. Mm-hmm. And it does for you, more for you maybe even than what the previous dream has done for you.
Yeah.
Is that true even? Or do you care to help like color that in for what you've experienced?
Yeah. You know, it's funny because running a restaurant is a service, right? You know, you are feeding people every day. And I think part of what motivated us to start a restaurant is that we were kind of always those people in college. Like, even though I had this tiny 450 square foot 1-bedroom apartment, somehow everyone always ended up at our place.
Classic.
Somehow I had a full-size dining room table in that tiny, tiny place of ours. And it's just my joy to feed people and to cook and to talk about food and to be around food. And I think once we started running a business, it really changed the nature of that service, because then, like I said, you've got to pay your rent and you've got to pay your employees. You're providing their livelihoods to them, and it's such a heavy responsibility. And you know, when things don't add up, the whole thing can fall apart, right? And it's the same with a nonprofit. You know, we're still like part of this system of capitalism. We still have to get money somehow to do what we do. But I think the nature of the service with restaurants is, you know, there's only a certain kind of person that's going to end up there a lot of the time, and that's someone who can afford to pay. And that was another thing that happened to us during the pandemic is, you know, people would come in, and you can tell by appearances oftentimes when someone is there, you know, just needing to sit, maybe use the restroom, hoping for a meal or a drink, and we would always provide that. You know, we would always, without question, and our team too. Like, we all were like-minded in that way. We're like, this person clearly needs some service, and we're just going to provide that for them. And I think too that, at least for me personally, when I'm going through really difficult times, I always try to look outward and ask myself, how can I be helpful to someone else? Because, I'm feeling lost, I'm feeling helpless, but I still can do good. I still can, direct this energy towards helping somebody else. And I think that's the best way we can help ourselves oftentimes, especially when there's this question of how, what do I do to help myself? I feel lost, I feel alone, I feel scared. Who can I help? Because then it takes you out of your own experience and helps you realize that you usually have more than you think you do when you're in that place of desperation and fear and overwhelm. And you can almost always be useful to someone else. And I think we feel a lot more hopeful when we feel useful, right? And I think too that this is something I will credit entirely to my partner, OB. But he's always been the kind of person that will just do something. I tend to overthink and overanalyze and, this is a great idea, but let's make sure that all these moving parts are in place. And he was the one that was like, we can just do this. We can just make food and go out there and deliver it straight to the folks living in tent encampments right down the street from us. And that's what we did. And I think oftentimes, we get lost in the decision making. It's why I was talking earlier about just make the choice, because there's never any way for us to know whether it's right or wrong. But if we, if we're guided by our heart and if we set out with good intentions, I think most of the time it ends up working out really well. And again, to just go out and do something, to go out and bring food to people that need it, was so empowering, because we realized we can do this. We have all the tools we need. We have all the people we need. And, it's not solving the problem. It's more like emergency relief than putting effort towards actually fixing the systemic issues that lead to this type of hunger. But it is meeting someone's needs where they're at, and serving people that are so often ignored and criminalized and just not taken care of generally. So, I think that answers the question.
When you talk about hope, how has that changed for you?
Yeah. It's tough what we do. 'Cause I think, the tendency for most of us is to drive by, right? We see, and the landscape has shifted a lot, but especially when we first started doing this work, the issue of homelessness was so visible to everyone. The whole mayoral race was kind of focused on these tent encampments that were popping up all over the city. And our tendency is to drive by. And I think most of us, I'd like to think that most of us really feel when we see that, we feel the pain and the suffering of these folks that, just aren't getting their basic needs met, aren't able to find housing for so many different reasons. But to actually just go and connect with them and see people face to face and hand them a meal and feel their gratitude, that gives me hope. Because even though I'm coming into their world and seeing the horrific circumstances that they are subjected to, and knowing that we could solve this problem in this country, that we could make sure that everyone in this country has housing and food, knowing that we don't, it's easy to feel hopeless. It's really easy to sink down into desperation and wonder what kind of world do we even live in that this is possible, that we're allowing this to happen. But to shift my thinking personally and just say, this is the service I can provide. This is my personal superpower, is I can make food. And, not everybody can. Not everybody's even able to cook, let alone cook well. But, right. But it's something that I do. It's something I grew up doing. It's something I love to do. And what I love most about cooking is being able to serve other people and meet this basic need, but also take it to that next level of, yes, we all need food. Yes, even folks who are experiencing homelessness can often access food, but to be able to enjoy a hot meal that's nutritionally balanced, that also is delicious and delivers the nutrition that their bodies need, as well as the pleasure that they deserve. That to me is sort of miraculous. And I just feel so privileged and grateful to be able to do that.
How are you, in the middle of all this that you've talked about, not overwhelmed? How are you not crippled by the things that you think maybe should be happening, but aren't?
Yeah.
But you're able to cut through the noise, if you will.
Yeah.
And provide and to give hope and to lean in. Because when I hear you talk about the wide range of possibilities and the overwhelming state of humanity, where it's like, this is such a big issue and a problem. How are you able to navigate that, see it for what it is, and then find your way in it?
I mean, I can't say I'm successful at it every single day. And I definitely, I think especially when we first started doing this full time, the overwhelm was real. Seeing really, really young people out there living in tent encampments, and seeing moms, and the drug use, and the abject poverty, witnessing that firsthand was really overwhelming. And then, you kind of come to reality eventually, where you're like, this isn't what I'm experiencing. This is what someone else is experiencing. And the fact that I have privilege, the fact that I have ability to help, it feels like a mandate. Once you witness that kind of thing and you realize, I am not in that circumstance, I am outside of that circumstance, witnessing these people, these humans experiencing the worst kind of poverty, hitting what most people's concept of actual literal rock bottom is, and living there, being there and staying there. I think it's so motivating, because knowing that it's a solvable problem, knowing that we just don't have enough political will, but that there are also so many people doing this work with us. I think the connections that we've made to other people that are providing services to folks experiencing homelessness, the work that we do, and just seeing regular people out there delivering food sometimes, other people like us that are like, hey, this is something I can do. I'm just going to go out there and do it. Knowing the community of people who, despite the hopelessness feelings that we get, just keep going out there and doing it. That's really motivating and inspiring. And I think it's also so necessary to continue to see the folks that we serve as human. to know that, like, you know, a lot of us are one or two bad circumstances away from ending up in the same place. You know, how many thousands of people in this country are on the edge of poverty, or, you know, are one medical circumstance away from losing all of their financial security. It's just so important to know that they really are humans just like me, exactly like me. There's no difference between me and the folks that we serve. And yeah, I think that's the perspective that's the most important to keep.
I also love your perspective, because you know, you're focusing on what you can do, not what you can't.
Yeah.
And if you can focus on what you can do, you'll get to the things that you can't do on your own, because you'll build a community around what you can do, and together we can accomplish what we can't alone.
Right.
Because we accomplish what we can't do on our own when we have a community that has become missional, that is doing something meaningful. And I mean, Whitney, I love what you're doing.
Thank you.
You're starting where you are with the skill sets and the passions that you have, and you're just meeting people in the middle of that crossroad. And you have the coolest produce arm I've ever seen. It's the coolest produce arm. Can you talk about that?
Sure.
Like, yeah. Tell us about that.
So, you know, I was mentioning before, I've been cooking my whole life.
Yeah.
The way I grew up was with kind of kooky, hippie, urban homesteading type parents in Fresno, California, where Driscoll's and Sunmaid and Hunt's and all these giant corporations grow their produce. It's like the breadbasket of America. And everybody at least has a fruit tree out there. So there's this whole sort of community around growing food. And my parents in particular were, you know, really growing quite a robust amount of produce at home. And on top of that, my dad is an amazing cook and baker, and we didn't have a lot of money back then. So we made everything from scratch, even stuff that most people don't make from scratch, like pasta and ice cream. My brother and I, we had one of those hand crank, you know, with the salt ice cream makers, where you're like sitting on the back porch waiting for it to solidify. Nothing makes you appreciate ice cream more than having to hand churn it, I think. But so, you know, it was, and that was all just normal to me. But it wasn't until I got to college, really, that I was like, oh, other people did not grow up this way. And none of my friends know how to feed themselves properly. And a lot of them aren't feeding themselves properly. And so I just, you know, really got interested in continuing to hone my skills as a cook. And I went to school in Boulder, which is also an amazing place for growing food. Colorado, of course, has a very, very short growing season, especially compared to California, which is pretty much year-round. But there was something so beautiful about that. You know, I started working in the industry and getting to know the local farmers especially, and getting to know just the painstaking love that has to go into growing food on a large scale versus your cute little home garden. And it gave me so much reverence for farmers, for people who grow food, for agricultural workers. Let's just give a shout out to all the unspoken heroes of our food system. Lots of them in Fresno, where I grew up. And I just, you know, I think the reason behind the tattoo was partially, I've always loved tattoos, and the idea of getting a sleeve really appealed to me, because it was like it was like my statement of I'm never going back to the corporate world where I'm going to be expected to cover this up and not be who I am and not like show who I am. I think, I hope that I never have to work for anybody else in my life again, because it's such a huge privilege and it's like the greatest freedom I think I've ever known. And so it was definitely like an assertion that like, this is the path that I am meant to take and I'm not looking back. And it's emblazoned on my body now. But also, it really serves as a reminder to me of like, what is the most important thing in our food system and in our lives as humans that need to consume food is like vegetables, because, our corporatized food system, has done so much harm to our very human natural connection to how things grow and how things end up on our plate. And I had this amazing upbringing where I got to experience that directly. I got to see food from seed form to, on my plate or in a jar as preserves or whatever the case may be. And again, I really didn't know that was such an unusual experience for a kid to have, for a human to have. And we do all this work in the community garden too, and I get to share that absolute joy and love of the garden and growing food with elementary school kids who, again, some of them do have gardens at home, but a lot of them don't. A lot of them have never seen broccoli in the ground or strawberries in a patch or picked a chive straight from the plant. Packaged foods and cereals and hyper-processed foods, I think, we already know that they do harm to our bodies and that processed food is not ideal nutritionally. But I think the greater harm is how much they disconnect us from our food system and how much they mask themselves as food and make themselves hyper palatable so that we get addicted to them and we want to eat more and more. But it's not actually even remotely resembling food, right? And you look at the ingredients list and it's 72 different things in one item. And, and really like, lettuce is just one thing, and so it's a reminder to me, like, this is what I should always be focusing on. And this is what matters to me and to my body personally, is I have got to eat vegetables to be right in my mind and body. So, and also, like, I just think it looks cool.
It does. It looks so cool. It looks so cool. I think, was that the first thing I said to you?
It might have been.
When I saw you today, it was one of the top 5 things I said. I may have said a lot when I first saw you. But, okay, go back to college.
Yeah.
If you don't mind.
Sure.
Because that is so meaningful. And why is it so confusing today? Because it is confusing. It's even confusing in the health industry.
Yes.
Because it's like, wait a second, I shouldn't be eating vegetables?
Right.
I kind of grew up I grew up in a way that it was like, okay, we do eat fruits and vegetables. That's a really important thing to do. But then now I'm not supposed to eat a vegetable all the time because anyways, it's kind of confusing. And then based off of your experience, I would love for you to teach us how to eat properly. Take a second. Like, think about those when you first saw those college people. They're maybe eating enough, but their nutrition value, right? And they're not eating maybe even, what does it even mean to eat a dense food item, right? And why is that important? And I was reading even the other day. Sorry, I'm getting a lot of questions right here, but I would love for you to take it in this route, if you don't mind, because I think it's really meaningful. And there's other people in this room who maybe eat a lot of processed food, and he would love some help. So I'm not calling anyone out. There's maybe a bunch of people here.
So let's start with this.
But there's a bunch of people listening.
Let's start with this.
Please,
first of all.
Hit me with it, Whitney.
It's so important to state that no food is bad. That processed food to people who are experiencing food insecurity is often the only nutrition that they can obtain. And for,
what is food insecurity, real quick? Do you care to define that?
Well, so
that's food
insecurity
I love what you're saying.
is kind of a more technical way to say hunger. And really, it's the same thing, but I think it connects us to the fact that hunger is very political, very systemic, and
it's also cliche.
Not the person who's experiencing it. It's not their fault.
Yes, and it's a little cliche because people who aren't hungry are using that term a lot.
Right. And actually, it's funny because in the world of hunger relief and all these different nonprofits that are focusing on this issue, we talk a lot about language. We talk a lot about terminology, and food insecurity is not always ideal, I think, because when you talk about hunger, it's a feeling, right? It's visceral. You feel it in your belly, and you can understand it intellectually, even if you've never if you've never been in a circumstance where you don't know where your next meal is coming from, you can still relate to the idea of hunger because you've been hungry. And I think to expand that idea of basic hunger into systemic hunger and chronic hunger, daily hunger,
and maybe even starving,
and maybe even starvation,
right? Because that's a much more visceral,
right,
intense form of hunger,
right. And I keep, I've mentioned a few times this idea of not having your basic needs met. And then contrasting that with the rugged individualism that we tend to embrace in America, especially. Why don't these people pull themselves up from their bootstraps, right? Well, how are you going to do that when you literally can't even think straight because you're so hungry, and because you don't know where your next meal is coming from, and because you don't have sufficient shelter? No one can function that way, and anyone who has experienced, I think, any level of financial privilege can hearken back to a time when they had less and think that was a lot harder. It was a lot harder for me to, do anything exceptional. And it was a lot harder to just function in my day-to-day life when I was just, less financially secure. And then imagine what that would be like when you really do hit the bottom. It's so important to me to acknowledge that first when we talk about nutrition and when we talk about food. And also the fact that processed foods can be deeply nostalgic, can connect us to memories of our grandparents, our parents. And I think everyone can include nostalgic foods like that in a healthy diet. However, when the majority of the food that you're consuming is in a box, is in the middle of the grocery store, comes from the aisle and not the perimeter, you're going to feel it in your body over time. I like to think of it in terms, in spiritual terms. There's a really wonderful herbalist and kitchen witch who's local to Denver. Her name's Asia Dorsey. And she talked, she has a Patreon newsletter that I subscribe to. And she talked about essential oils once and how she doesn't necessarily favor them because you're taking this really powerful medicine from nature and you're hyper concentrating it. And then the soul of the ingredient might not be present anymore because it's basically ultra processed, right? Like, even though it wasn't designed in a lab and maybe it was made by someone local and you know, made with so much love and care, you're still kind of approaching it with the same mentality of, I'm going to take this thing and I'm going to, you know, rip it apart and put it back together in hyper concentrated form, you know, to treat people's illness or whatever the case may be. And I don't want to like upset essential oil people or anything. Like, I love essential oils too. But the idea of that, when she wrote about it and I read it, was so interesting to me because, you know, you think about wheat, I think is one of the best examples. We typically grow wheat as a monoculture, meaning it's one giant farm that only grows that one thing. And we already know that in nature, like, monocultures don't even exist, right? Like, it's too hard on the soil and on the land. So that right off the bat is not as good for the environment. On top of that, because we're creating these huge fields full of one thing, they are ultra vulnerable to pests. And so we literally, the way that we harvest wheat, and I think a lot of people still don't know this, even though it's, you know, it's come to light in the past decade or so and is much more widely known. We drench the wheat with chemicals and it kills the plant. But right before it's fully dead, that's when we harvest it. And so we are eating these chemicals, glyphosate, that, you know, repel other pests and keep things that could kill the wheat away from it. But it kills the wheat in the process. And so not only do we do all that in the growing process when the wheat itself is still perfectly intact, but then we harvest it, we pulverize it, we take all the nutrition out of it, and then we make food out of it. And, you know, when you really look at the whole process from beginning to end, it's like, how did we start? How did we even get here? How did we even get here? But of course, it all sort of ties back to, you know, our food system changed so much after World War II, and we focused a lot on what advantages chemistry could get us in terms of growing, but, you know, didn't really test it out in terms of how it affects our body. And now in, you know, 2025, we're seeing the long-term effects. You know, there's lots of people who, you know, especially like my parents' generation, who grew up in the age of better living through chemistry and like processed food is convenient and inexpensive and great. And, you know, I think like moms and households were so well intended in embracing these types of foods. And again, like, I don't believe that any food is inherently bad when, you know, sometimes processed food is all people have access to. But we became so out of touch with our food system at that point in time, and it's really only gotten worse. And so, I mean, how does someone eat well is such a complex question, because so many economic factors come into play. Like, what budget do you have? What kind of privilege do you have? What kind of access do you even have? Can you even get fresh vegetables into your house? But for those of us who have the privilege of choice.
Yeah, begin there. And also maybe even let me give some parameters, because I love how wide a range you like. That was really thorough. Well, I don't actually know the answer to this. Real quick, what's your degree in?
Oh, well, I never finished college.
Which is cool.
What
were you working on?
Started as a vocal performance major. So I got very, very close to finishing my bachelor of music.
That's amazing.
I also went back and studied integrative physiology and started the track to be I was pre-med. My mom is a neurologist. And so, you know, she especially always like really thought that I should be a doctor and
Sure.
kind of encouraged me in that direction. But then I had the traumatic miscarriage experience while I was like back in college, focused on like becoming a doctor. And I realized this is not what I want.
Right.
I don't want to work in this system that feels so beyond my abilities to repair it as one person.
Yeah.
But you know, I think I am a healer and a caretaker.
No, totally.
And food was really just a different outlet for that instinct and that ability.
Well,
that
you're
I
a
have.
professional at like, you're a professional when it comes to owning a restaurant and serving people. And so I'm not trying to diminish any of that. I just thought, I was like, you know what, that's interesting, but because you were going you were going the musician route, then you were going pre-med.
Right.
You had this life circumstance happen, and then you're like, and at the same time, you had food as the backbone of, and produce and taking care of people as the backbone of your life.
It's worth mentioning too that if I had had my druthers, I would have gone to culinary school, but my parents were very against it. Especially, and I will say, especially because some of those culinary institutes can be predatory, and they you know, hook kids in to and saddle them with really high debt. I mean, they are more expensive than universities in a lot of cases. And like, what kind of jobs are out there for recent culinary student grads? Let me tell you, they do not pay.
And everyone
Getting
wants
a line
experience.
cook gig as a culinary student versus someone with no experience,
Right.
You're going to get paid the same.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of grateful that I never went that route, because I mean, I don't know, my whole life would be different. So who knows? Again, those little decisions, right?
Yeah, don't worry about changing
They send you on
them.
a whole other trajectory. But yeah, that was always what I wanted. But I think intellectually, I felt like that's not a real pursuit.
Ooh.
You know, it's like not good enough.
Oof.
That's what I wrestled with for a lot of years. That's what I still wrestle with, to be honest. Wow. So yeah.
Okay. So that's so good. That's so good. I want to maybe even talk about that wrestling. As we go back, though,
yes,
I would love to put some parameters on this. Let's say somebody is eating like a college student does.
Yeah.
They maybe have enough money
Mm-hmm.
to purchase whatever, not whatever they want, but enough.
Yeah.
Go to the grocery store weekly.
Yeah.
Or go buy food enough. They can get enough food for a week.
Yeah.
In a week's notice. Okay.
Yeah.
And they choose maybe to go the more processed route
Mm-hmm.
because that's what they're used to.
Mm-hmm.
They go to the nostalgia.
And it's easy.
They go to the easy. I don't know how to cook route that someone else maybe in here has, but I'm just kidding. Don't worry. But okay, let's call it that.
Yeah.
How do you help that person
Yeah.
begin to take steps toward a more nutrient-based diet?
Yeah. Well, I think the first step is finding a vegetable you love. For my daughter, it was sweet potatoes. And
I'm in. I love sweet potatoes.
I did. You've got a kid too, right? You've probably
3.
heard of baby-led weaning, where when you go through the process of starting to feed real food to your kiddo versus, just breast milk, if they're lucky enough to be able to be breastfed, or formula, as the case may be. It's a gradual process. And a lot of parents go straight from formula or breast milk to baby food, right? Which is processed. It is ultra processed in some cases. And it all kind of has the same exact texture. It's all pureed, right? And that's to prevent the baby from choking, right? But we actually have this evolutionary mechanism that helps prevent us from choking. And babies are capable at around 6 months or so of eating food and actually handling food, which is super important for their fine motor skill development. So there's this whole method called baby-led weaning, and it's really easy to find info about this. But you basically introduce foods that are, soft enough for them to eat themselves and not choke on, but are still not to the level of being totally processed. So like, for instance, if you have apples at home and you cook them and you puree them into applesauce, it's still less processed than applesauce that you're getting on the shelf, but it is processed. Sweet potatoes, I would just peel them, dice them up, and roast them. And they're so soft and they're sweet that our daughter just got addicted. She loved them, and she's still like if I can't get that child to eat
that's great.
other vegetable, she will eat her little cubes of sweet potatoes. And I really think I know so many people who think they hate.
Wait, you cube your sweet potatoes?
What's that?
You cube the sweet potatoes?
Yeah, just dice them up into cubes.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's cool. Good. Sorry.
And you can buy them cubed too if you don't have the time. That's an easy thing to make at home, even if you're strapped for time. But I'm convinced, and my mom and I talk about this a lot because she did the same thing with me. She made all of our food from scratch. This was pre-medical school, of course. Then she went to medical school and couldn't cook anything anymore because she had no time. But thank goodness my dad and I still cooked for each other. But anyway, she's really convinced, and I think there's a little bit of scientific research to this, but I'm not sure, that if when you introduce food to a kid, it's all the same texture. They don't even have all the sensory mechanisms on their tongue to taste when they're that little. So taste isn't quite as important as we think it is. It's really more introducing them to textures that will get them more amenable to different textures when they get older. Wow. And I really think a lot of the pickiness that can come, that can evolve from eating nothing but like pureed food is just a lack of exposure to different textures. So I think early exposure can be so helpful. But of course, if you're grown up and you didn't have that early exposure and you really just feel like you have an aversion to vegetables, like find one thing that you're not repelled by. If you love potato chips, then you at least like potatoes. And I bet we could find a way for you to enjoy a baked potato at home. You can stick that thing in the microwave, and it's so easy to put. You don't even have to peel it. You can just scrub it a little so it's nice and clean, and eat the whole thing, and find a way to like fall in love with baked potatoes, and then start experimenting with other vegetables. One thing that I've started doing lately, which is like probably really dorky and maybe weird, is, we all have snack impulse, right? Especially particularly bored times of day or hungry times of day. You just kind of want to like eat a lot of something. It just feels good. And so I've started just snacking on lettuce leaves, like getting my bag of lettuce and directing snack impulse.
You snack on lettuce
toward the one thing that like we all could probably eat more of in our diets is lettuce. And I mean, you don't want to go overboard because too much lettuce is a little rough on the gut too. I won't get into detail, but y'all know what I'm talking about, I think. Anyone who's just eaten a very big salad and hadn't had salad in a while, like it'll really move through you. But it's the mental association, I think, of like we eat so much. We eat so often without mindfulness at play. We eat so often out of habit or like, oh, I just have to get something in my body before I leave the house or whatever, like without intention, right? And processed food has done that to us. It's given us this idea that food can be convenient. But guess what? Like, vegetables are convenient. Lettuce is junk food because it is ready to eat out of the bag. And if you can just kind of help redirect your impulse towards something that is good for you, that you enjoy, because the enjoyment aspect of it is really important, I think. I think we all deserve to enjoy what we eat. And it's not actually going to be as beneficial to our bodies if we don't enjoy it. Like the mindfulness association there, I think, is really important, because they've even done studies about mindfulness and food where they will tell people. Actually, this is an interesting one, an exercise study where they took a bunch of hotel service workers, cleaners, and they said, hey, guess what? All this work that you do every day, that's exercise. You're getting exercise. Yeah. And then the control group weren't told that. The folks who were told that they're getting exercise lost weight, just doing the same thing that they were doing every day. But knowing intellectually that it was beneficial to them created additional benefit.
And I bet it made them even work a little bit harder, because it's like,
yeah, maybe
probably the product that they were even producing as the worker was even better.
Right.
Because
or maybe
positive.
They were just more mindful about like which muscles they were using.
Or like, I don't want to waste this
and
workout, so I'm going to drink water instead of drinking a soda. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, sometimes if I know that I'm going to be working out a certain way, I'll prepare differently.
Right.
I will rest differently. I will perform differently because I'm viewing it positively.
Right.
And it's like, oh, come on. What are we changing here?
Yeah.
How we think about it.
Mindset.
I love that. Find your favorite vegetable.
Yes.
You could probably do that with fruit, I imagine.
Yes.
And
yes. I mean, fruit nutritionally is less important.
Sure. But you got strawberries on your arm.
I do. I am pro fruit. I will never go keto. Even if, some study comes out and it's like, yes, this is definitively the way to eat, which that's a good thing to talk about too. Like the nutritional overwhelm is so real right now. And we are told keto is ideal, or paleo is ideal, or Mediterranean is ideal. And guess what? We all have different genetics. We all have different ancestry, different bodies. There is no one diet that can be ideal for everybody. So get that idea out of your head that there's going to be this, panacea, this one thing that's perfect for me. Listen to your body. I think it's so important to really tune into how foods make you feel. And I think, again, that comes back to mindfulness, because, when we're just mindlessly snacking on a bag of chips and then we realize we've eaten the whole bag, then all these feelings come into play after. We analyze it and we say, oh, this is bad food, so I'm bad for eating it. And now I feel guilty. And get rid of all that. Just tune into how you physically feel after a bag of chips. And if it's good, if you feel good,
I have a friend.
Maybe you have the genetics to be a potato chip eater. God bless. Keep going with it. But I doubt it. I doubt it feels good in your body.
No, you're not feeling good.
And if you really tune into that, then you're going to stop eating so much of the things that hurt you.
I have a friend who eats whole boxes of Wheat Thins in one sitting. I'm like, dude, you should chill out.
Wheat Thins, that's a strong choice.
Yes.
I like that.
Wheat Thins. Oh my gosh.
I can't say I've ever craved a Wheat Thin.
No.
But I love crackers.
Yeah, well, I guess it's the same kind of thing. But dude, eat a whole box of Wheat Thins in one sitting. I'm like, we need to find your favorite vegetable.
Yeah.
We need to find your favorite fruit.
Yeah.
Let's stock our fridges differently, my man.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be hard. He's like, well, I want it to be easy. And I'm like, it can be if you're going to the grocery store, just don't buy the Wheat Thin, that's it. That's it. Really. I want to know what, I'm even thinking about this when it comes to my kids, because it's like, I wonder what their favorite vegetable is. And if we celebrate their favorite vegetable,
Yes.
I bet they will want it more.
Yes.
Because it's theirs.
Well, and also,
Does that make sense what I'm saying though?
Yes, absolutely.
Because it's their choice. It's their...
Yes, their choice. That is the key phrase.
Ooh,
and
come on. I just said a key
too,
phrase
you
for
did.
Whitney.
You
Oh,
did.
my
And I think
goodness.
too that, like my daughter, for instance, we call it melty cheese. Have you guys ever seen bread cheese at the store? It's a little bit fancy. It's a little bougie.
I don't know. Bread cheese?
It looks like a thin slab of mozzarella that's been baked. It's kind of like brown and bubbly on the outside. Okay. And it stays solid when you melt it. So you can put it a little, square of it in the fridge. The microwave, and zap it for like 12 seconds. And then it's this little mass of melty cheese. That's what we call it, is melty cheese. And she loves this melty cheese. She could probably eat it all day, every day, and be happy.
Eat cheese all day too.
We all love cheese, right?
Yeah, it's probably my youngest son's problem is he's eating a little too much cheese.
Well, and so here's the thing. Put the thing that they love with something else that they need. So what I started doing is, I'm revealing my dorkiness multiple times
this is a
in this
mom
podcast.
Move. Everybody get ready for the mom move. Here it is.
I started making melty cheese rainbows. So I would slice a cucumber and kind of, cut out the center of it so that it looked like a rainbow shape.
Okay.
And then stick it so that the little clouds were pieces of melty cheese. And she asks for the rainbows now and not just the melty cheese.
Ooh.
And it's not that she loves cucumbers so much. And when I offer her plain old sliced cucumbers, she's pretty indifferent about them. But when you put them together with something that really delivers pleasure, it can not only enhance that thing, but like make the slightly less desirable thing totally desirable.
Okay, hold on. So you're also bringing play.
Yeah.
Into this, right?
Yeah.
Creativity into this. Does that actually play a role?
I think so, because ultimately...
Well, because fun. Okay, so maybe it's more like fun if you want to be more adult about it.
I think
But that's got to play a role.
I think the fun and the joy, the root of that is also pleasure, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Because,
enjoy.
When's the last time you went to the movies and didn't want popcorn
every time
by your side?
I'm just kidding. Yeah, I'm with you.
Let me tell you guys something. Like, I am a healthy eater, but you put a bag of popcorn in front of me,
yes,
and it is gonna be gone.
Yes, this guy over here.
And I don't know
this
how
guy
many people are
back.
sharing with me, even if it's just my 7-year-old, but that bag of popcorn is getting destroyed. Like
100%.
I cannot stop myself.
100%.
I just can't. And
butter,
popcorn, honestly,
salt,
is really good for you. It's got lots of fiber. It's a whole ingredient thing. I mean, obviously the stuff at the movie theaters is not ideal. But if you love popcorn, start making it at home. Another
it's actually not that bad of a snack either.
Excellent entryway into the vegetable kingdom is popcorn.
Because I guess it's corn.
I mean, anything that's starchy or sweet is typically going to be more appealing to folks that identify as picky, because they're more frequently used for like hyper palatable processed stuff like potato chips,
right,
and popcorn, but also like they're still going to have that familiar taste in their whole form, and so it's, I think, like a gentle entry point for picky folks.
I love how you're talking about this, because if you're going, let's just full circle. You're going back to the college. Mm-hmm. You're like, hey, let's actually have more fun.
Yeah.
Let's actually find our favorites.
Yeah.
And let's actually be freed up to make some decisions for ourselves. And it's like, oh my gosh, that's really cool. And it's not boring, which I think is something when I'm even just sitting with you, or the other day when we were even FaceTiming, I was like, okay, I'm sitting across from somebody who is not boring. You're not living a boring life. That doesn't mean it's not that doesn't mean it's not hard.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it's not intense. That doesn't mean you're not having to be strong. That doesn't mean a lot of things that we think that means whatever. But you're not boring, Whitney.
Appreciate that.
And you're doing things that are meaningful. So as we take steps to even personally find more, freedom and fun and fruit and vegetables and having a more nutrient-based lifestyle, you are living that lifestyle that's not based. I believe you're more nutrient-based, and I'm not even talking about when it comes to food, but when it comes to like emotional health, meaningful life, vision and focus. Like you are very dense and full. You're living a full, satisfied life, which is really what we want people for physically, why we want them to eat that food. Is because they'll be more satisfied. Yeah. They'll be able to live more full and perform and have the life that they were maybe made to live or why they're here on purpose. And it's like, it's this really valuable thing that they can take hold of. And so I want to just applaud you for that, because you step into meeting unlike most people ever do. And it didn't come necessarily fully intentional. You just started seeing problems. Yeah. I mean, you are intentional. But that's not like you were talking about how you kind of got away from that give back thing because the restaurant got busy. Yeah. Right. And the problem came into view and you're like, hold up, time out. Because we can't do the thing, we're going to do this thing. What do you do now? Because you are living a full, satisfied life and you sold your restaurant and you do this 501c3, amazing 501c3 thing. Do you care to describe what it's become? Yeah. That would be amazing.
It has evolved. It started as just the Giving Meals program. And when we originally filed for 501c3, our initial concept was that we would do it out of the restaurant and just continue to do it that way. And when we realized we wanted to do it full time and started making the announcements that we were going to close, and you have all the sort of press interaction that comes with that, because they love when you open and they love when you close, and then unless you're doing James Beard Award nominated stuff, they ignore you the rest of the time, unfortunately. But an article came out, a couple of different articles came out describing what our plan was. And some dear friends of ours who own Nocturne, which is just a block away from Green Spaces, where y'all are going, and where we currently work as well. Their chef, Dustin Beckner, was the sous chef at the first restaurant I ever worked in Boulder. And so we've known each other for 20 years now. And he was also really hankering to do some good through their restaurant. And it's kind of a swanky jazz club type of vibe. So yeah, all the press came out about us going on this new venture, the Preservery Foundation. And Dustin was still the chef at Nocturne at the time. He has since moved over to Lever's Locavore, just down the street from us. And he really wanted a chance to do something good through his work at the restaurant. And he saw that we were doing this hunger relief nonprofit full time. And so Nicole and Scott, the owners of Nocturne, who we had been friends with ever since both of our restaurants were in the planning stages, is when we met. And, they were just down the street from us. We really supported each other during the pandemic. And they reached out and they were like, hey, we are closed Mondays and Tuesdays and no one is using our kitchen. And we would love to offer it to you guys. And after I got done being stunned by their beautiful generosity, we said, absolutely, yes. And so that's what we do on Mondays and Tuesdays is we come in and we use their kitchen. It's tiny, but it's so well laid out and has, all all the type of equipment that we need. So that was a huge boon, because honestly, I don't know how we would have been able to get the Giving Meals momentum off the ground without the use of this like commercial kitchen that that they just donate to us. And so we started, just getting into this weekly routine of production and distribution. So we make the meals. We stuff bags full of snacks, because again, those processed foods, sometimes that is the only thing that someone out there wants to eat. They're not always trusting of food, and packaged food just feels a little bit safer and also much more familiar. And at first I was like, well, I don't want to be giving them non-nutritious food. And then I realized it's not just about the nutrition, the pleasure and the safety are also incredibly important elements of the service that we're providing. So we have bags with, some snack foods and some sundry items. And sometimes we'll get additional donations of things like hygiene products and hand warmers in the wintertime and other things like that. And then the meals that we make are always sort of like a one-dish meal. So sometimes it's pasta with like a veggie-laden sauce, or sometimes it's more of like a soup, like a chili or something. In the summertime, our folks really seem to love this pasta salad that we make, where we have a bunch of different roasted veggies and beans, and just like make a kind of vinegary dressing and toss it all with pasta. Pasta is a real hit. And sometimes people just like call us the pasta people out there, because that tends to be what gets the best response. So we keep bringing it out to them. And it also is really good at filling you up and, just giving them that feeling of satiation that I think, again, when you're experiencing hunger on a regular basis, you don't always get. And so meanwhile, as we're kind of building up this Giving Meals program, our daughter started school at Garden Place Academy, which we chose because it was just like a 5-minute drive from the restaurant in the neighborhood of Globeville, which is adjacent to 5 Points, where the restaurant used to be. And it was during the pandemic that she started school, which was the weirdest possible time, I think, to start school, because I didn't even know what her teacher's face looked like or what her classroom looked like, because we couldn't go in and we were all still wearing masks every day. But the big thing that I noticed at her school, at Garden Place, was that they had this beautiful garden that had completely gone neglected. It had, it had folks working in it from what they told me before the pandemic, but when in-person school went out the window, so did any involvement in the school grounds. And so and it's school gardens are so interesting because they require all of this maintenance outside of the school season, right? Like, it's this amazing tool and resource that schools can use, but there's 3 months out of the year when they're at their peak that like students just aren't there. And so, the first year we didn't really want to come in and be like, we're going to save this garden and, be saviors and do this, help the community. We really wanted to see like what does the community want out of the garden? What are their needs that maybe we can help with or provide? And like, what's the best thing for the school community and the neighborhood community? And, so the first year it was another mom friend who's also an expert gardener helped me just like, we tended to a couple of plots. We're just going to like grow some stuff and see what happens. And the amazing thing about gardens is you start to work in there and people start to get interested and they start to check things out and, this is something that we could maybe do too. And so the second year we had the nonprofit established at that point, and we were like, we want to take this on. We want to bring this garden fully back to life, make it a beautiful resource for the school, grow food for the school community and the neighborhood community. And that's our only plan. Let's see what happens. Let's see what comes of that. And it was just amazing. Like the kids' involvement and getting the kids into the garden and just showing them the worms in the dirt. And like my favorite thing to do is hand them, something that grew there and see them chew on it, mint. Interestingly, even though it's like a leafy green, it's kind of like salad. Kids love mint and they will chew on it and they will like put a green leaf in their mouths and eat it when you couldn't imagine feeding them a salad. Same thing with chives, because like a lot of kids like onion flavor and just, aren't used to necessarily like eating onions on their own. But they chew on the chives and they see that it's like this green thing and it tastes like onions. And so anyway, we've now entered our third official and fourth in total growing season in the garden. We never know when they're turning the water on, and there was a burst pipe this year that has prevented us from planting anything yet, and it's like planting season right now. So we're at this like waiting point where we're ready to jump in, but not quite in there yet. But yeah, this year we were able to obtain funding to hire Anthony Garcia, who runs Birdseed Collective, which distributes food every Monday, interestingly, just like us, to the Globeville community through the Globeville Community Center, which is just a stone's throw away from the school. He came in and painted this beautiful veggie mural on the shipping container in the garden. And we had a whole week's worth of programming for the kids where we just, brought classes out and fed them chives and, showed them the blossoming fruit trees in there and everything else. I mean, you don't even need a lot of plants to get them interested. It's such an amazing tool. And again, I just, one of the most important things I think that I can provide as a service to humanity is just trying to spark that garden joy in a kid and like get them even interested in how food grows. Even if they're never going to grow anything themselves, if they've seen something that they eat in plant stage and they understand that a little bit better, that's going to improve their lives. That's going to improve their relationship with food. And I think so many of us have a fraught relationship with food. And so I really believe that that's one of the highest services that I can provide is just trying to spark that joy, just trying to make that connection with kids. And I've seen them just come alive in that space. Like, it's hard just being in a box in school all day and like gazing out the window and to put them in this outside environment where they actually get to be a little bit louder and be a little bit more rambunctious. Maybe even be more themselves if they're a kind of rambunctious kid. It really changes things. And I've seen kids come to life in that space in such an amazing way.
Whitney, it's so beautiful. And when you think about what you're doing, are those the two sides to the coin?
Yeah. Well, what's really interesting about the garden is that Globeville is a very food insecure neighborhood. Should I pause?
We're good.
Okay. Globeville's a really food insecure neighborhood. And there's also a lot of folks that tend to congregate in that area who are experiencing homelessness and hunger. And what we realized, because the garden has running water, is that some of the very same folks that we were serving are actually utilizing the garden space. Maybe as a resting point, maybe as just a place to wash their hands.
Wow.
Maybe to take some food. We've definitely had folks take food and like, you know, sometimes if it goes to waste, it's heartbreaking. Like one time somebody picked a watermelon, realized it was not yet ripe and ready to eat, and then just like threw it on the floor. And I was just like, man, that kind of breaks my heart. But if somebody takes it and actually eats it, it's like, yes, that is literally what it's for. It's there to grow food for folks that need it, especially folks that need fresh produce. So it is connected to what we do directly in that specific way, and especially because the giving meals grew to the extent that we not only were delivering these meals directly to folks experiencing homelessness, but also bringing them to the community fridges, one of which is right down the street from the school and across the street from Birdseed Collective, where they do food distributions for the neighborhood. So even without us realizing it, it was all connected. And the more we've done work in both areas, the more we realize just how interwoven these systems are and these people are. So, you know, I don't know what the garden looks like long term, other than, and I mentioned this to you guys earlier, like every year we ask Principal Andrea, like, you know, do you still need us here? Do you still want us here? And as long as they do, then we'll still come and we'll still keep that garden alive. It's a tremendous amount of work, especially obviously during growing season. These summer months are when we really kick into garden mode. But I love it. It's just such a joy, especially like I said, when I get to work with the kids directly and sort of spark that garden joy in them. It's one of my favorite things that we do.
Whitney, I love what you do so much because it's so unique, but it's so meaningful, and you're bringing two worlds together, and you're solving problems like crazy, and you're doing it, and you don't even know how it's going to end up.
Yeah.
And I think what is meaningful about even that is I love just thinking through with you, how can we, because you're inspiring individuals with what you're doing. You're growing kids, and you're trying to, and you're also providing like an emergency care.
Yeah.
For the unhoused in Denver. And so as you think about everything together, and as somebody wants to connect with what you're doing, and as we kind of wrap this up, because you and I could literally talk all day, I've got so many questions. We're going to have to further this conversation and keep going. But as we wrap this up, how do people connect with you, support you, learn from you? What are those avenues? Because I imagine you maybe have a newsletter that you even do that you're like sharing what you're learning. I imagine you have different ways that people can connect with you. So as we wrap up, like, how do that people do that?
Yeah. So, you know, we take volunteers and we rely on volunteer workforce for all of our various activities. It's harder to bring people into the cooking process with giving meals just because we only have that narrow window of time in which we work, and people have, you know, regular 9-to-5s, usually can't participate in those activities. But the nice thing is, since we have the bags that the giving meals go in, we do a lot of like bag stuffing events, which we can do literally anywhere. We've done it at green spaces and we've done it at schools. It's such an amazing thing to get the kids involved with that, because they're really thoughtful about it. It's so beautiful, but we went to St. Elizabeth's School because a very dear friend of mine sends her kid there, and she like every year reaches out to organize an event like this with us. And they made these laminated little cards that just said lovely little messages like, you are, you know, appreciated, and pass this on to someone else. And so we put like a sweet little message from a kid into every giving meal bag that week. And it just made the distribution even more exciting and fun because there's this little surprise for them in each bag. And we did one for Valentine's Day where they made little Valentines. And, you know, it's so beautiful because you don't have to explain this stuff to kids. They're like, oh, people are hungry? We got to feed them. It's perfectly logical to them, you know, and it's so beautiful to stay connected with the younger generation. It's so important for staying hopeful, like we were talking about before, to know that like it is innate for us to want to help folks, and we just like that gets programmed out of us over time, and it doesn't have to. We can reconnect with that part of ourselves, I think, at any stage in life. So yeah, like kid-friendly, family-friendly volunteer events are so great. Even just, you know, social media shares and likes are so helpful, and engagement in that way. We have a donation page on the website. You can donate generally or specifically to the Giving Meals program or to the garden. And the garden, you know, because we are just about to blow it up with beautiful produce, is a really fun way to volunteer and get involved. And that is much more flexible hours-wise, because we can arrange to meet someone in the garden at pretty much any time, including weekends. So, yeah, those are all really great ways to get involved.
I love that. And then will you tell everybody what's your website's called again?
Yeah, it's just thepreserveryfoundation.org, www.thepreserveryfoundation.org. You can find us at the Preservery Foundation on IG and Facebook, and that's it.
Awesome. No, that's great. We will link those in the show notes below.
Perfect.
As well, and tag you in what we're doing and when we post. So, man, Whitney, I'm so excited for what you're doing. I'm going to come help you out this summer.
Nice.
in the garden.
We would love that.
And
we would love that.
So awesome.
Yeah.
So awesome. Thank you for letting us just capture a little bit of the story today.
Yeah. Thank you for helping me tell my story.
Oh,
it's really
my gosh.
meaningful to us and important, I think, because, you know, all of us in this world of like hunger relief and nonprofit development, we tend to get siloed, and we tend to get isolated, and we tend to protect our funding, and it's so important to collaborate and to tell our stories and to tell our whys and to help other people realize that, you know, they're capable of making a difference too.
Yeah. Well, you are making a difference. Thank you for spending your time with us. We can't wait to spend more time with you. This is the Full Vantage Podcast, and these are the types of people. Whitney, she's the type of person that we must be learning from, that we must be encouraged by and encouraging. And how do we be a part of what they're doing? Because I think a lot of times when we're a part of someone else's dream, how they're solving the problems around them and using their skill sets, that's actually how we learn what maybe our dream needs to be. And we build community that way. And so I just want to encourage everybody to keep leaning into to the Whitneys of the world, and specifically her, and maybe even others just like her. So thank you for all you're doing. It is an honor to sit with you.
Appreciate you.
You guys have a great day. See you soon.